Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The Indian Premier League is suspended for a week amid escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. Putin hosts Xi Jinping and other world leaders at Russia's Victory Day parade in Moscow. Pope Leo XIV has celebrated his first Mass in the Sistine Chapel 1 day after his historic election as pontiff. To our top story, the Indian Premier League, cricket's richest tournament, has been suspended for a week as tensions between India and Pakistan continue to escalate. The decision came after a match was abandoned as military exchanges between the two countries stretched into a third day. Authorities say the suspension will allow time to assess the situation. For more on this, I'm joined by former England cricketer Dawid Malan. Dawid, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show. Can you explain why the suspension is just so significant?
Yeah, I think it just highlights how big the issue currently is between India and Pakistan. I don't think decisions like this are ever taken lightly to suspend massive tournaments and global tournaments like this. So, I think the fear from the players, questions from the players and the situation that India and Pakistan are in at the moment just highlights how big the situation is.
The IPL attracts many of the top players in the world. What does they plan, and have you been in touch with any of them?
I haven't been in touch with anyone, no, but reading all the reports, a few of the players will be making their way home at the moment, using this week to go back to families and to assess what they want to do. I guess when you're in a situation like this, you can just trust the organisation and the people organising these tournaments to give you the most information. And they've been given this week off where they'll probably go home, assess, speak to their families and see and wait what the next plan could be from the IPL.
After this week's postponement, are players expected to come back to the league or will they withdraw?
Well, I guess it all depends on the situation at the moment or between Pakistan and India. If it all settles down, then I can't see why they wouldn't go back in a week's time. But, if tensions are still as high as they are and exchanges are still happening, I'd be surprised if a lot of the foreign players went back. The only other option would be to move the IPL to a different country. Logistically, how that will work, I don't know. But yeah, I think that would be one of the first questions the players ask is, will it be safe? Where would it be played in India if it does happen? And if it doesn't happen in India, where would they move it to?
And Dawid, you were actually part of the Punjab Kings, and last night their match against the Delhi Capitals was called off due to a power failure as the war does escalate. What financial impact does this have? And also, how does it impact the fans?
Yeah, I think from a financial point of view, if the tournament does eventually get cancelled, I think it impacts the players massively. They've obviously signed for a fee for a whole tournament. So from a player's point of view, you'd probably not get your full fee, which, would be, obviously there's bigger things in life, but would be disappointing from their point of view. From the organisation side, if they aren't able to put the IPL on a bit later, whether it be in a week or in a couple of months' time, I guess the TV rights and everything that was paid for it, they'll take a big financial hit with that. And then, obviously paying fans and sponsors. But, I guess from the fans' point of view, when there are such tensions, it is sometimes quite nice to have that different distraction in watching sport. And it'd be disappointing from the fans' point of view that this has happened. But, sometimes there are bigger things in life to worry about and bigger concerns in life. So as much as they'd be disappointed, I think it's the right decision at the moment.
You touched on this earlier, but could the IPL be moved to another location? What are the current options possibly on the table?
Yeah, definitely. It's not the first time this has happened with the IPL, not in terms of the severity of things that are going on between the two countries, but COVID hit back in 2020, 2021. They moved the IPL to the UAE midway through. So there are options. They've played it in South Africa before. I think realistically, if they want to start again in a week, it will have to be in India or the UAE. But then there's the clash with the PSL that's currently just announced that they'll be moving all their games to the UAE. So I'm not sure how they'd be able to fit both leagues in at the moment. South Africa probably wouldn't be the option right now, considering that it's winter there. So if it doesn't happen in a week's time in India or maybe Sri Lanka, somewhere like that, I suppose or suspect that they'll probably start in September. They've got a massive test series coming up against England in a few months' time, and the IPL will have to be finished before that or start after that. So logistically, it's quite a headache for the organisers, and I guess they have to wait and see how this next week plays out from the safety concerns of players and the people of both countries.
Dawid Malan, former England cricketer, great to have you on the show. I really appreciate your insights. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
To talk more about the escalating tensions, I'm joined by Dr. Hassan Abbas, who's a professor at the National Defense University over in Washington. Thank you so much for joining me. There are reports that there are blasts in Jammu city in India-controlled Kashmir. How did tensions between India and Pakistan escalate to this point, and what has been the driving force behind it?
Thank you very much. Great to be on your program. I think the current tensions between India and Pakistan, as we all know, underscore the deep-seated sensitivity and volatility inherent in this relationship for over 70 years or so. The countries have gone to war at least thrice. There were smaller scale violence or conflict as well. But in this recent context, this has happened since there was a terrorist attack in the Indian-controlled side of Kashmir a couple of weeks ago. And since then, India retaliated or India reacted, and they argued that some of these groups have terror bases in Pakistan, but they have not provided any evidence. And they opted to go for action within Pakistan. In the process, some of their fighter aircraft, some of the best fighter aircrafts were shot down by Pakistan. Reuters say this, others say this. We don't know whether 3 or 5. But since then, both the sides are using drones to find locations of their anti-aircraft missiles and other stuff. So it is in that context that yesterday there were Indian drones in Pakistan. The 30 of those were shot down, Pakistan claims. And today there's news of some drone strikes or activity in the Indian side. These are not big attacks or missile attacks, but both sides are now trying to irritate each other. They are hopefully looking for an off-ramp that they want to de-escalate. There's a lot of mounting international pressure also. But it's a very serious moment. It is a serious moment because both countries have nuclear weapons. They have very strong conventional forces. And tragically, the hatred, the animosity, and the intense challenging situation for both sides and their mistrust about the other is at play. That's why it is extremely important for international community and others to play a role and try to create some sense in this arena.
And you were just talking to me about the latest attacks and how we've got to the stage between India and Pakistan. But do you think the latest attacks, like you've said, which include drones and other activity, does signal a dangerous escalation between the two nations?
Indeed it is, because when these drones are sent to the other side, in most cases, the purpose is to find out how the other side's missiles and other aircraft are maneuvering. These drones are meant for surveillance, but they want to figure out what is the movement of military forces on the ground. So they are collecting a lot of intelligence and data. In normal circumstances, they don't send drones because that is seen as a violation. The other side would shut it down. But at this moment, for all practical purposes, both the countries are at war. India went deep into Pakistan. Previously, they used to attack or get into a kind of a conflict situation in Kashmir only. The Kashmir is divided into 3 parts. India controlled Kashmir, Pakistan controlled Kashmir, and China also has a part. This is a disputed land under the international law. There are some UN offices there as well. But in this case, India opted to target some of the locations deep into Pakistan's Punjab, in Bhavalpur, in Sialkot, in close to Lahore. So that was seen as a full-fledged war. And that Pakistan most probably, or they are under severe public pressure to respond to this. So this is a warlike situation, but any further escalation, what we call in our field in security studies, this escalation ladder, this can very quickly go to a point where these tit-for-tat attacks against each other may go to a point when the ground forces go and take some space on the other side. And from that point, it is not very far that they start thinking about use of nuclear weapons. I really hope they will not come to that point, but this escalation is very, very dangerous for this reason.
And just, Doctor, you mentioned this, that this region has always sort of suffered with conflicts that do happen. But how does this compare to previous flashpoints between Pakistan and India? And are we seeing a repeat of the past, or is this different in any way?
That's a great question. I think it is similar to what had happened before. This is a bit more serious in a sense that previously there were wars, of course, in a warlike situation, whether in 1947, 65, 1971, those were major escalations. But at that time, both the countries were not nuclear weapon states. So we knew that they will fight a war for a week, 2 weeks maximum. International organizations will jump in, big states will jump in to ensure peace. But in this case, this has started happening for the last 15, 20 years, I should say, almost 25 years, that small incursion happens. Militants from Pakistan side or Afghanistan, they go in, because Pakistan had been unfortunately supporting some of these militant groups which were conducting attacks in India. But Pakistan has a position, they say they legitimately own that area. And because India had not allowed a referendum there, to ask the people which side they should be on, that India had been violating international law. That's Pakistan's position. And Pakistan was then saying, we cannot control some of these hardliners, radicals who want to go and ensure that they have a space the way they want it. So this challenge has been there. And at least thrice or 4 times in the last 25 years, there was these incursions, but these were only in the Kashmir area. So it is similar in that sense, but different in a way that this time India opted to go deep into Pakistan with their fighter aircrafts, although the fighter aircrafts never crossed the border. But in this day and age, they have these missile systems which can target a place 200 miles away. So there's no need to cross the border. They from their own side can attack. But crossing the international border is a major escalation. And this type of escalation has happened for the first time since both have become nuclear weapon states in 1998-99. So in that sense, it is more dangerous and it is more serious than before.
And Doctor, what role can the international community play in de-escalating these tensions right now?
Another very important point, which we must start thinking about, because it's the conflict is in front of our eyes. We really understand the perspectives of both sides, how both sides' media is doing warmongering and creating a further chaotic scene, making the lives of the ordinary people hell. I mean, you were just talking about the cricket, how cricket is cricket is like second religion in India and Pakistan. For these cricket matches and these championships to be stopped, that also in itself is a major challenge. That's why the diplomatic engagement is extremely important. Restraint. Both the countries need to restrain, but someone needs to tell them. And currently, we know US is trying to play a role. We know that China, Turkey, Qatar, they are all trying to go both sides. In fact, Saudi Arabia's leading leaders and Iranian leaders are also actively playing a role, going to both the countries, trying to tell them to de-escalate, just stop right there. But the tragedy is that because this tit-for-tat attacks environment is now entrenched in this area, someone needs to really need to explain to them not only the pros and cons, but tell them that, okay, if you are not going to stop this, then there are certain impact of that. There will be an impact. It can be economic, it can be political. So someone needs to give a talk to both India and Pakistan in a far more serious way, and mentioning to them that this will impact their relationship with those broader countries. So international community, leading countries, both I think United States, China also in some shape or form. China has a lot of influence in Pakistan. US has a huge influence on India as well as on Pakistan. So international community and regional countries, I think Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, Oman, many of these countries which are playing in their own way very important role as peacemakers. We have seen in Afghanistan how regional countries went to Afghanistan leadership and tell them, stop these human rights violations, go opt for these things. These are the conditions for engagement. I think the region, if region will not play an active role now, international community by and large and big players will have to jump in. So I think the region need to come together and not only at this time just de-escalate. Get them, India and Pakistan, on the negotiation table. Tell them, because otherwise this will again happen in 6 months. Again, this will happen in 2 years. This cycle is unending. Someone needs to help bring India and Pakistan together, get them on the table. They have very religious traditions which are very similar. Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism have been talking and interacting to each other, similar language, similar cultural context, the Bollywood movies, cricket. These are the bondings. Someone need to just start or initiate the process. I think senior elements ultimately, I'm very optimistic and hopeful that this crisis may actually lead both the countries to think that how long we are going to continue to get into this cycle, impact our economy, create discouragement for the young people in these countries. We are talking about more than 1 billion people in India and about 250 million people in Pakistan. They cannot live in this chaotic circumstances or fear of war. So
Dr. Hassan Abbas,
someone will be.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for your thoughts. It was really great to have you on the show. Once again, appreciate all your insights. Dr. Hassan Abbas there speaking to us. Russia has marked the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II with a major military parade. China's Xi Jinping joined Vladimir Putin as he told thousands of soldiers and more than 20 international leaders that Russia remembered the lessons of World War II. Let's take a look at some of the parade. Moving on to another story, China says it will defend justice in upcoming trade talks with the US set to take place in Switzerland this weekend. The talks are seen as an icebreaker between the world's two largest economies and a possible first step towards resolving a trade war that is clouding the global outlook. Yina Li reports from Beijing.
China's leader landing in Moscow to join in on Victory Day celebrations with No Limits partner Vladimir Putin. While in Russia, Xi Jinping's deepened cooperation in a show of solidarity amid global uncertainty triggered by US President Trump's trade policy. Trade talks set to take place in Switzerland in the coming days are a potential first step towards de-escalating tensions that have led to a de facto mutual trade embargo and piled pressure on the Chinese economy. Despite that, Beijing's been ambivalent about cutting any deal with Washington.
This meeting was scheduled at the request of the US side. China has not changed its position on firmly opposing the tariffs imposed by the US. As we have repeatedly emphasized, China holds an open attitude to dialogue, but any dialogue must be conducted on the basis of equal footing, respect and mutual benefit, and any form of pressure tactics and coercion against China will lead to nowhere.
Leading the negotiations for China will be Vice Premier and Economic Tsar He Lifeng. Chinese state media reported that Beijing decided to come to the negotiating table after assessing global expectations and its own interests. The talks come after the US imposed punishing 145% levies on Chinese exports, met with retaliatory tariffs of 125% from Beijing. The spats rattled markets and cast a shadow over the global economy. Businesses and investors are anxiously awaiting signs of a thaw in US-China tensions. Last month, the International Monetary Fund lowered its growth forecast for 2025 from 3.3% to 2.8%. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jameson Greer will attend the talks in Switzerland on behalf of the US. Bessent says the US doesn't want to decouple but insists on fair trade with China.
It is time for China to graduate from developing country status. It is the second largest economy in the world. They are a large, important economy, and they should no longer be granted the status of a developing economy.
Ahead of discussions, Trump insisted China is on the back foot.
You know, they very much want to make a deal. We can all play games. Who made the first call? Who didn't make it doesn't matter. It only matters what happens in that room. But I will tell you that China very much wants to make a deal. We'll see how that works out.
Experts warn little could come out of the meeting and that they could just be the start of protracted negotiations that may last throughout the entire term of the Trump administration. Yanali, Al Arabiya, Beijing.
We can now go live to Moscow for the latest of the Victory Day parade in Russia with our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova. Dasha, thank you so much for joining us. Vladimir Putin has welcomed world leaders to Moscow's biggest Victory Day parade in years. How significant is today's event?
Well, it is very significant, and for a number of reasons. Primarily, it is significant in Russian history because there are many generations in Russia who remember these family stories that are being retold from one generation to another. World War II has touched every family in the Soviet Union. 26 million people have died as a result. And the second reason why it is important, particularly now, is the very fact that there were up to 30 heads of states coming to Moscow's Red Square to attend this significant Victory Day parade. And the Kremlin has thanked those international leaders for coming, saying that they came despite the pressure from the West.
And just picking up that, we are seeing the likes of Xi Jinping standing beside Vladimir Putin at the parade. What message is Moscow trying to send with this?
Well, first of all, Moscow does send a very strong message that Moscow is not alone, that it is still a very important power on the international arena. And the very fact that Xi Jinping, the president of China, has come to the Russian capital despite that security situation in the lead up to those days is also very important. Russian President Vladimir Putin held numerous bilateral meetings. He has met with the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. He held bilateral talks with the Egyptian president and many others, all that taking place in the Russian capital. So the message from Moscow is very clear. Moscow is not alone. There are other nations that support Russia's fight against Nazism, because keep in mind, over the past couple of years, Moscow has been tying the events of the past to the events of the present.
Dasha, was there any reference to the conflict in Ukraine during the speeches or the parade itself?
Well, we have seen the Russian military who are participating in Russia's special military operation in Ukraine marching in Moscow's Red Square. There were 1,500 of those who have participated out of 11,500 troops participating in the parade in general. There were also North Korean troops with whom President Vladimir Putin has shaken hands after that parade. And we know that some of the commanders have participated in the effort to liberate isolate Russia's Kursk region from the Ukrainian incursion. And also the Russian president, in his speech, which was quite typical for these sort of events, also said that the whole of Russia, in his words, supports Russia's ongoing fight in Ukraine and the people who are fighting there, that is, those soldiers. So Ukraine was mentioned in that sense.
Correspondent Dasha Chernyshova, thank you so much for joining us. Pope Leo XIV has celebrated his first Mass a day after being elected pontiff. He told cardinals in the Sistine Chapel he hopes his election can help the Catholic Church bring light to the dark nights of this world and also address them in English. Correspondent Trent Murray has sent us this report on the day's events from Rome.
Well, here outside the Vatican, there is just one topic of conversation this Friday, and that is the Papa Americano, the 69-year-old Chicago-born Pope Leo XIV, the first American pontiff in the Church's history. Many crowds here and visitors still absorbing this news. He was a surprise candidate. He was not considered a front-runner in this race, but it has often been said that when a potential pope enters that conclave as a potential pope, then they will likely leave as a cardinal. And that theory has played out again here. We have seen him early this morning hold his first Catholic Mass in the Sistine Chapel. It was before 132 of his cardinal colleagues that elected him to that position just 24 hours ago in that very same room. He asked them to walk with him as he takes on this job of leading the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. He also spoke in English at times, saying it was important for the Catholic Church to try and bring light to the many dark nights in the world. Now, from here, we do expect him to continue working to assemble his team of advisors around him, and we will try and watch to see what his priorities will be. He certainly has had a social media presence before taking on this job. He has spoken out against fighting climate change, welcoming and supporting refugees. He has spoken about the Black Lives Matter movement and supporting it. And he's even butted heads with Vice President J.D. Vance before on X, formerly known as Twitter. But now, of course, for many of the faithful here, they are still just trying to enjoy this moment of history. You see many people from all around the world streaming down to the Vatican to try and to take this in. You still are seeing singing and praying and people just enjoying this moment. But the work really now does begin for the Vatican as they help Pope Leo take on this role. We are being told May 18th will be his inauguration day. For many visitors and holidaymakers here, this undoubtedly will be a memory that they won't forget anytime soon. I was just speaking actually to one of the souvenir vendors here, and they said they are working overtime to try and get souvenirs and merchandise ready with the new Pope's face on it, to try and make some sales while the crowds are still here, so these people can take home a memento from the day that Pope Leo XIV was chosen. Trent Murray for
For more on this, I'm joined by Reverend Robert Gould from the Catholic University of America. Reverend, thank you so much for joining me. So, as an American Catholic, how does it feel to witness the first election of the first Pope from the US?
It's great to be with you, and it's really exciting here at Catholic University of America. Yesterday, when the new Pope was announced, he came out on the balcony, and we discovered that he's an American. There was tremendous shouts and howling from the students here, really of glee and joy. It's so he was an unexpected candidate for so many, partly because he's an American, and it was a common theory that there's no way that the cardinals could elect an American because the United States is so powerful politically in the world, and to be Pope is also to be the head of state, of a very special state that has moral influence around the world. And yet, really, we should have considered him more, this Robert Prevost, we should have considered him more, that Cardinal Robert Prevost, as a possible candidate because of his tremendous background. So not only is he an American, but he has dual citizenship. He's also a citizen of Peru, and he has tremendous experience in the Vatican and in Rome, governing over a religious organization that's called the Augustinian Fathers, that has worldwide breadth. And he was the superior general for them for 12 years, and he's also been working in Rome for Pope Francis in the designation of bishops from around the world for just a couple of years. So he very rapidly rose, and I'm sure too that in the Vatican they're looking for someone who can clean up the financial mess in the Vatican. In fact, I run the church management program here. We promote transparency and we promote best business practices in church institutions. And I have a sense that the cardinals who chose him, including the Europeans, are looking for a steady administrative hand in the new pope.
And you said there it was a surprise, but how can Pope Leo balance his national identity as a US citizen with the universal nature of being the Pope? As you said, the US is very political, and you didn't expect this.
It's amazing how the politics of the United States is now intertwining with the Vatican. Pope Francis, his very last formal audience was with Vice President J.D. Vance and with his family. And there was this back and forth between the Vice President of the United States and the Pope that began even just before the Pope fell sick. And it was amazing is that J.D. Vance actually quoted a Latin text that is from St. Augustine, who lived around the year 400. And the Pope engaged him also on this Latin text. And now we have an Augustinian father who is Pope, and he's an American, who has been criticizing the vice president and has been challenging Trump's administration, especially with respect to their immigration policy. What's interesting is there's also a lot of common convictions between the Trump administration and Pope Leo. These common convictions, for instance, have to do with his very clear condemnation of socialism and of communism, any form of collectivism, and also his condemnation of gender ideology, his defense of human life and his defense of the family. So it's going to be interesting to see how Pope Leo, I think, is going to exercise especially powerful leverage with the United States in order to promote a more moral and stance from the administration, especially with respect to the weak and the vulnerable and the marginalized, to be able to see in them the presence of God, the Creator.
So, Reverend, what qualities do you hope the new Pope will bring, especially in his first days and months as leader of the Catholic Church?
Yeah, of course, the conclave is secret, and there may be some whispers or some innuendos that may come out eventually. But I have this strong sense that given the polarization, even among the cardinals, that they saw in Pope Leo a crossover candidate who had appeal among those who are more traditional and those who are more progressive. And this ability that he has to unite, to listen, and really in a humble way to represent the faith that we believe is in Jesus Christ, who is our Savior, that they see him as really a servant of the servants of God, as one who represents truth. And as you mentioned at the beginning, that he wants the light of Christ to come into the world. He wants peace to overcome war. He wants love and mercy to overcome conflict among all peoples. And it seems that he's even brought this among the cardinals within the conclave.
Reverend Robert Gould from the Catholic University of America. It's always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, and God bless you.
Even more community kitchens in Gaza have had to close down this week due to lack of supplies. The kitchens have been a lifeline to hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza as a humanitarian crisis continues to escalate due to Israel's blockade on aid. For more on this, I'm joined by Hassan, spokesman for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. Just how hard is it for civilians to find food, water, medicine and shelter right now?
Good evening, Leigh-Ann, and thank you for having me. After more than 2 months of full blockage of humanitarian aid into Gaza Strip since the beginning of last March. And with the resumption of these hostilities on the 18th of March, thousands of civilians have been killed and injured as a result. Humanitarian action in Gaza has become an extremely complicated process because basically humanitarians lack what they need to provide urgently needed humanitarian assistance to over 2 million civilians have been reeling for a long time from the impact of this conflict. It has become an extremely challenging process for civilians to find food. Sometimes it's even dangerous. Sometimes people do not make it during the day. They cannot have what they need to suffice their needs of their families and their children in terms of food, clean water, proper health care. And sometimes, unfortunately, they don't survive the explosions that sound day and night. For example, our Rafah Field Hospital in Rafah, the ICRC field hospital that has been working for over a year now, and it's the only fully functional hospital across all the Rafah area. It's still responding to casualties resulting from hostilities, and it has been running dangerously and critically low on some of the medical supplies and equipment that some of them have actually exhausted, leaving this hospital and the teams there a few more weeks until they would not be able to continue their life-saving work. Same like for community kitchens that are supported by the ICRC. They will keep working to provide the only one hot meal thousands of families receive in their day for a little time until they run out, same like many other supported kitchens by other humanitarian actors. So in a nutshell, life in Gaza has become very much dangerous, and it's literally hell on earth, as many have expressed, especially from the children who we speak to in the field hospital or the community kitchens, waiting in a long queues until they can find some food, basically.
Right now, are you in Gaza, and is there any safe place for the people in Gaza to go where they can get any form of help or a lifeline at all?
Well, the main lifeline for the entire population in Gaza has been closed, which is the Kerem Shalom crossing, which was the main way for humanitarian aid trucks to enter Gaza. And that brought basically not only food and water, but also brought engine oils necessary for generators that are feeding the hospitals and spare parts for desalination plants that produce drinking water for thousands of families, as well as water and wastewater pipelines that we and other agencies, humanitarian agencies, are using to rehabilitate the damaged water and wastewater network. And this was working well during the ceasefire. The ceasefire was essential not only to improve the living conditions of civilians in Gaza, but also to bring home those who have been apart from their families, their loved ones, including the hostages, including the detainees. And we are waiting for for the hope to witness another ceasefire, which is why political efforts are the only solution. Humanitarian action cannot be the only solution. It cannot be relied on to change the reality without the necessary conditions. And these conditions are pretty much simple: adherence to the international humanitarian law, the provision of protection for the civilians and the healthcare workers and the humanitarian workers in Gaza, and immediate opening of the crossings into Gaza and allow humanitarian aid to reach those in desperate need for.
Hassan, spokesman for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Gaza, I really appreciate you joining the show and telling us the situation on the ground in Gaza. Once again, thank you for joining. A reminder of our top stories. The Indian Premier League is suspended for a week amid escalating tensions between India and Pakistan. Putin hosts Xi Jinping and other world leaders at Russia's Victory Day parade in Moscow. And Pope Leo XIV has celebrated his first Mass in the Sistine Chapel 1 day after his historic election as pontiff. And that's all from us on W News. The rail deal is up next, and then it's Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora, and that will be us, but we'll also be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye, and thank you for joining us.